Aloha, it's Dave Lawrence. How are you? A big mahalo for tuning in. We're in the HPR Atherton Performing Arts Studio, and it's a special thing. We have a lot of events that we do in here, but I don't think I've ever done one that I'm as privileged to do as this. It's Journey's Neal Schon. It's my 7th time getting to sit and pick your mind, so big mahalo. Thanks for doing this.
How you doing, Dave? It's good to see you again.
It's good to see you again, too, and we're going to be talking about The Calling, Neal's new record, but before we do, I just got to say, what a show last night.
It was fun. You know, I think we got off to the right foot. Looking forward to Friday and Saturday. It was fun. It's so always great to get back to the island here. You know, I have such a history with this place, and you know, the beginning of me starting to play here in 1970 with Santana, and so it's been a nice, beautiful, long run, and it's always amazing to get back here. There's like such, you know, magical environment here.
16 in that very building.
15.
15.
Yeah.
At the Christmas of December 1970. Can you imagine that? I mean, so that's got to be a little humbling.
And then, you know, so many great years at the Crater. I sort of miss that.
The Crater.
You know, I run a motorcycle sometimes when I come here, and just to drive up in there and remember it, you know.
Is that what you do?
So many shows there. Actually, the Crater Festival in 1973 was Journey's second gig ever. When we first started, we played Winterland for Bill Graham
New Year's Eve
the night before, and then flew over here and played the Crater the next day.
Was that a Bill Graham show, or he have anything to do with the Hawaii end, or no?
I don't remember.
What a cool thing. I mean, what a start, huh? Bill.
Yeah.
Winterland, then here.
Somehow I don't think that we would have ever been able to survive playing in smaller blues clubs there, though. We were kind of like, you know, known as, you know, the Dead on steroids, like jam band, original jam band.
And you
San
were.
Francisco, yeah.
Yeah, that early journey. Well, last night, as you returned to the arena, before you got on stage, a little bit of The Calling got on into the venue too, and I'm imagining for some of the folks there that was their first time getting to hear it. I've been digesting the record ever since we did our phoner.
Yeah, I'm not sure anybody. They probably didn't know what they were listening to last night, because when we come here, we're not usually not able to bring the screens and all that. And usually, you know, when we have our screens, we put a picture of the record out, you know, up
that's
there.
Nice.
And let people know what they're listening to.
Little visual cue.
Yeah, this is what you're listening to. And so what you'll be hearing on Friday and Saturday is actually my solo record, The Calling, before we play.
That's cool. It's a nice way to introduce it to folks, as you had said you were going to do. The album has a lot of different kind of flavors on it, Neal, and you've got Igor Len doing just about every track on there practically, right? I mean, he's and not only the piano, he's also helping you out in other ways.
Igor Len, I met him years back and did Electric World, which was like a double CD that I put out years ago. A very like progressive, avant-garde jazz, you know, African rhythms. It was like all world music, I would call it, you know. And you know, it was really, I listened to it now, and I think it was a bit ahead of time. Not exactly a commercial record, but I think a pretty good, just a cool statement as a music, you know, musicality and you know, paying homage to a lot of great
reflective
artists.
Of your background too.
Yeah,
with the Santana
exactly.
thing.
And so anyway, we did that, and then we did Eye on You, and you know, always had a great time working with Igor. This album though came about in sort of a different way. A lot of the other albums prior to that we wrote on the spot. Eye on You, actually, Igor brought in a lot of music that he already had. I was on tour, and then I added to what he had, and we, you know, put it together, and it came out like that. But this record, I went in kind of with a blank slate, and you know, I had a lot of ideas, but no songs, and I really wrote it without Igor this time. I just kind of made it up on the spot with Steve Smith was there. It was great to play with him again. And I'd find a riff like in a looping machine that I brought, and I'd have Steve lay down a rhythm groove, you know, about 4 bars in the Pro Tools, and loop him, and then I just sort of, you know,
riff on
sketch with a rhythm guitar of what I was hearing in my head. then he'd come back and he'd write out my arrangement, whatever I put down on the rhythm guitar, and play it one full drum track through like he was playing with a full-on orchestra, with dynamics and the whole thing. We'd talk about what section was going to be like soloing section, or this is going to be the theme melody, and he played accordingly. So he was perfect drummer for me to work with because he has such a musical mind, and he's very just thought out. His parts are real thought out without sounding contrived and generic. It still feels loose, but it's tight. And for anybody that listens to the record more and more, really his drums really contribute to this record a lot.
Oh, and they're high in the mix. They have a real prominent sound.
I think he was scared when he first heard my mixes because I actually had him higher than me at a lot of spots. But I didn't want to go. When you record drums, you record with tight mics and you record with ambient mics. Led Zeppelin is usually 2 mics. Like one mic in a certain part of an ambient room,
right?
And one tight mic on a snare,
and
maybe a bass drum. But usually they use nothing but room and very little tight miking. And so I wanted to go more for an ambient sound on Smith. I had a nice sounding room, kind of acoustically like the one we're in right here. I'm hearing a nice echo, and sort of mixed everything around it after I got the drum sound.
What a big difference between Eye on You and this. The drum sound alone is like such a different, because he's just propelling it into...
Eye on You could have been a much more rocking record. The big difference is I went to a real studio and recorded The Calling at Fantasy, where I did, Escape and Frontiers with Journey, two of our biggest records. And... I set up for real in a big studio. Eye on You I did in a bedroom at my house with a computer, and I had a Roland, sample drum kit that Omar Hakim played, and that was, he's such an amazing drummer. When I listen to it now, I'm like kicking myself that I didn't go into a real studio, at least just to record his drums.
Right, to have a better sound with him. Writing environments for this stuff, Neal, prior to going into the studio, are there particular writing environments you seek? Like, when does a riff come to you or an idea in terms of the development?
I like I said, I didn't write like full songs, and I never really do. Even going back to all the Journey stuff from the beginning, I used to carry around a cassette machine. I always had a cassette machine. Now it's a looping machine, and I would just lay down. If I got a riff idea, a chording idea, or a melody, I just record it immediately so I wouldn't forget it. And so that's what I do now. And I knew with technology the way it is,
it's
you can
advantageous.
Get a Line 6 or so many different looping devices. There's a great Roland one out there, a Boss unit, has a drum machine in it and multiple recording. You can overdub, you can put bass lines, you can put vocals on, and basically make like a fast little demo of not really a complete song, but your general idea of what you're going for.
Right, in terms of the development. That explains.
And so that's what I do anymore. And I fill up these machines, and then rather than dumping them into the computer and getting more confused, I just buy another one. So I've got a closet full of sampling machines,
That's awesome.
And when I go in the studio, I kind of bring them all in, and I plug them in, and I go, let's see what we got.
And figure out what you like from there.
Right.
The Calling, gotta be the most badass riff on this thing. I mean, and nowadays they're saying, like, with the way that the world works with songs and consumption, you gotta put that tune first on anything. I mean, the whole record is brilliant, but that one has this thumping classic rock kind of, like, the riff is huge.
The record was a different record to sequence, I worked at it quite a while, and it's really funny. I heard it a zillion different ways, tried opening the record with other songs that I actually thought were better songs on the record, and somehow the flow, when I listened from beginning to end, it didn't quite flow as well as the order that I have it in now. And I really, I recorded a record so quickly, but mixing a record, I mixed on and off for about 2 years. I wanted to let it digest a bit. I like riding around on a motorcycle, listening to it. I like driving to it. I'd go to Nashville. I'd work with Dave Komolsky, the engineer that mixed the record with me and also mixed Last Journey record. He's very talented, and I checked it out for a while. I'd go there and I'd spend like 3-4 days, mix, and then I'd come home and listen to it for a while. And then I'd go back to him and go, no, I'm not quite happy with this direction on this song, and I hear it kind of going here. And I really took my time. I spent a lot of money actually mixing the record. And but really, that's the finishing touch of any record. And it doesn't matter how good it is. If you record it in one day and it sounds phenomenal, the playing, if it doesn't sound good in the end when somebody's listening to it, it's like you playing in a concert with a bad mixer in front.
Right.
Nobody's going to hear anything that you're doing, so it doesn't matter.
It's like doing it in a vacuum. This way you're constantly taking a sample of it, keeping your ears as the ultimate arbiter of what to do. And on that note of the sequencing, when you talk about that, I've been like, songs, like I get them stuck in my head. I get the carnival jazz, that ending when you make, I guess it's like the key change when the keyboard solo comes in, like towards the second half of that. Yeah. Stuff like that, when you say that you developed it in little chunks, that ending segment there, how did that come about? That was
You know what? It was just completely improvised.
Wow.
And what I had, alls I had on that song was the rhythm. I came up with a lot of the rhythms, the sideways rhythms that are on there. I either played Smith something or I hummed it to him.
Oh, wow.
The sideways drum stuff, I'm always coming up with stuff that's kind of like African sounding.
And you hum what you want?
Not so, straight ahead. I like kind of sideways drums, more straight ahead like bass lines and sideways drums, and something the guitar can move around with a bit. And so I had, the basic riff and a rhythm and a melody in the beginning, and the rest of it's like improvised. And then when we cut it, Smith just kept playing, and he laid down the drums before anybody played on it, really. I mean, I just played a rhythm guitar, and I laid the basic thing, and then I just, multiplied it for, I don't know, it could be like 4 minutes, whatever, Steve, just keep playing. And so he's out there playing, and then he went into his jazz thing and started playing at the end, just kept on grooving. So after I heard it, I went, wow, it's sort of, I listened to it for a while and I went, let's just make it go somewhere different.
Right.
And I came up with the chords, and kind of played a little more outside, like jazz.
Yeah, dissonance.
And then, I went, Igor, he plays like such great piano, acoustic piano. And so I thought, I think, guitar records are really great, but there's been so much that's been done that you have to kind of pass the ball around and let other people play, and then it kind of changes the color format and, gives people, a little bit more
contrast.
Contrast is important, I think, to keep someone's interested in an instrumental.
There was another jam on there. There were a couple of them, but real big, like metal sort of build up. And I guess it was True Emotion that reminded me of almost Tony Iommi at the end, the way the thing just like builds and builds. There's like a lot of different flavors on this thing.
Every song was its own song, and I tried not to repeat
any kind of thing, right?
Yeah,
it shows.
Steve was really good for me to work like that with too, because we'd listen to it, and as it was going down, and we'd say, "No, we already have one like that. Let's do something different."
Backsmash also, by the way, and the Backsmash, where it's almost like Metallica-esque kind of thing, and you have the acoustic solo that you do in there.
I put the acoustic solo on. There was no acoustic solo, and as I was mixing the record, I heard it go by, and before there was an acoustic solo there was the orchestration Igor had done, and there's an oboe, really beautiful oboe line that he plays, and this orchestration and these counter string parts, and it sounded like done to me, but I was sitting there mixing it, and I go, what about like, a nylon string guitar solo there, a classical guitar, sound, just it's something different, because the song is so electric.
Yeah.
And I think the contrast, ended up working really well. And so I did it like in the last minute.
That's a lot like I was saying with the carnival jazz. It has that nice touch to it, and different instruments, I guess, coming together.
I think, for these type of records, I think that for the most part, everybody's really digging it. I do get criticized, though. You read all kinds of criticism, all the time because you read reviews, and
Sure.
Some people are just saying, "Well, it just sounds like a jam," and actually, that is what it is.
What it was, right?
And to me, it sounds like more of a well-constructed jam. Whether or not you like my guitar playing, that's another story altogether. But so many things have already been done, with instrumental music, and so many great guitarists out there, and jazz artists and Miles Davis. I mean, it goes on and on and on.
And you've done a lot yourself, so it's like after having done a bunch of instrumental records, I can imagine you want to push it into a new spot.
This is really more where my head has been at forever. Like, this is kind of what I was doing a little bit after I was in Santana. Even with the early Journey stuff, it maybe was not as, jazzed out or
Right.
in sections or opened up like that because I wasn't as seasoned of a player back then. But that's sort of what I was listening to back then.
You're on that note. Your playing has changed so much over time, and one great example I notice is I mentioned it to you last night when we were hanging out at the Blaisdell, watching the vid of you in the Crater, 77,
Yeah.
and you're doing Of a Lifetime,
Right.
and it's a brilliant bunch of notes, dude, that you hit in that. And you think about that version of Neal Schon, and then I think of like some of the shredding moments on this thing where you're just like blistering amount of notes. As you get older, it's kind of like, I wondered this. I was talking to my boss, Bill, who you met. When I look back at old interviews, I'm like, I wasn't that refined yet. I'm a lot better now. When you look back at that old period from when you didn't hit as many notes, is it almost like as you grow up, you find there's more you want to say? I mean, because you just hit so many cool notes now.
Of a Lifetime was very melodic. There were no outside notes in that at all. Just everything was very melodic and sort of bluesy and electric at the same time. And a lot of interplay between, Ainsley Dunbar and myself, his rhythms and the drums. To me, it's always like, with these kind of records, it's between drums and guitar.
Interplay.
Yeah, and letting things kind of float around. And that's why one of the reasons that I did not use a really great bass player on this record. I knew great bass players that wanted to play on it, and I was like, I played on a couple tracks, and I'm not like a great bass player, but I just thought after I listened to it, I played most of my solos on the record, I mean all of them actually, without any bass guitar on the tracks. It was just Smith, myself, and maybe a rhythm guitar.
And then you laid the bass.
And then I put the bass on, and then the guy I was thinking about using was not available. He was gone, and so I have bass, and I play bass a lot, like on some of the demos I do for the band. Actually worked on a lot of parts, like on Don't Stop Believing with Ross. I wrote a lot of those counterpart bass parts that he ended up playing, which came from like Jack Bruce,
kind of things.
And so I just kind of like the concept on this record of doing, more of what Jimi Hendrix was doing in his early records, which is like, letting the drums be jazzy, the electric blues guitar moving around with the drums, and the bass doing more of what I call like a tuba bass, just filling out the bottom end, not necessarily no popping,
right.
no funk, like that, just
maintaining a groove,
like feeling the bottom end, just sitting there.
Right.
Something's got to sit there.
Anchor.
So things, yeah, exactly. You need an anchor so things can move around. And, I always admired, Guitar Shop that Jeff Beck did. And we did a tour with him in Japan before. I was in the band Bad English at that time. But we toured together when Jeff was with Terry Bozzio and Tony Himes.
Ooh.
And they had no bass player. It was Tony playing, bottom end on the keys, and as well as, patches, chord patches, and whatever other parts he was playing. And I loved the freedom of what it sounded like on stage because it was uncluttered, If you get busy with drums and you have a busy drummer, you have a busy guitar player, if you have a busy bass player, then all of a sudden it really goes into fusion land, which is not a bad thing, but I just like, to keep things rocking and fusing and, space, a little bit of space.
You mentioned Jimmy, and in our little dialogue, I mentioned Sabbath. Plus, last night I noticed Nice Touch, Heaven and Hell played before you guys went on stage, too. Ronnie James Dio era Sabbath. Blue Rainbow Sky. I have this great thing Neal did, like a track by track, which is nice if you're going to do a track by track with him. And you say, this track is dedicated to Ronnie James Dio, the night he died outside my house.
I don't know if I said exactly that.
Well, that's what the thing says on it.
Did I say that?
Yeah, it says.
Well, actually, what I was, if probably it's a little, they took a little bit out of the whole thing that I said. Yeah. And what happened is the night that that Ronnie passed, I live up in Marin County, and I live on this hillside with like 10.5 acres. And I get to watch the sun go down in the mountainside every night. And it's always a beautiful sunset when it's hot out. It's always like these electric skies. And it's like reds, purples, blues, beautiful. This particular night, it was blue. It was like a rainbow, blue rainbow. And I took a bunch of pictures with my cell phone. And this was like years before a year and a half before I went in to record the record. But the picture always stuck in my head because it was so vibrant and colorful. And when, I was with Smith in the studio and said, we need, something that's kind of majestic and slow, like an old Journey ballad that has a lot of space and something that you can soar and play a lot of melody on. I just kind of went like this, and, and I kind of ripped some Hendrix stuff in the front and tried to play, as melodically as I could over some classical chord changes. And he goes, yeah, I like that. And so when I listened to it, that image of the picture came to me, and I just felt a connection with Ronnie for some reason. And, and I went, so that's it. I'm going to call it Blue Rainbow Sky.
Had you had any kind of rapport, personal thing with Ronnie?
Yeah. I met Ronnie back in the 80s. When we did the We Are Stars record.
Oh, yeah, right, Stars, right.
That benefit.
Yeah, with all the different cats.
Yeah,
together.
And he had contacted me. I didn't know him prior to that, but he contacted me to go down to LA and play with all these different guitar players. And I didn't know quite what to think of it because I didn't consider myself a metal guitar player. And, it was like Yngwie and every guitar player under the planet was there. And so I actually tried to get out of it. And I called Ronnie and I go, I don't think I'm going to come. I've been up all night long partying and carrying on, and I'm ready to go to bed. And he goes, no, you have to come. And so he says, really, he goes, you're one of my favorite guitar players, and I really want you on this record. And so him saying that to me, I, jumped in a car and got to the airport and got down there. And he got me in front of the line where I was sitting next to Yngwie. It was funny, and I was having a conversation with him. He's actually a very nice guy.
Yngwie Malmsteen.
He heard a lot of stuff to the contrary, but the day that I spoke to him there, he was really cool. And we were both sitting in line. Ronnie moved me up to the line so I could get back home and get to sleep. And he promised me he would do that. And I was sitting there listening with Yngwie to everybody before us, and they were punching, in the studio, every 4 bars. They'd play a hot riff and they go, oh, punch me in. And it was taking hours, Some people were taking hours for a little solo piece, section, And I went to Yngwie, I said, man, I completely hate recording like that, and I'm not going to do that. I said, I'm going to go in and I'm going to play 2 takes from beginning to end. He can use whatever one he wants. Then I'm going home and I'm going to sleep. And so that's what I did, And Ronnie ended up loving it. And I think, I don't recall exactly, but I know that he used mostly George Lynch and myself.
Yeah, I remember that. That was his USA for Africa kind of thing back then. Right. I remember that.
It was his version of We Are the World, right.
Right. Yeah, that was nice of him. Song of the Wind 2. You close out the album. Kind of neat for Hawaii fans because it's going full circle on our journey, if you will, no pun intended, with Neal Schon, because it's a moment in your life from Santana.
Yeah.
But expounding on it, what made you say, I'm going to do this?
Steve Smith had 4 days to record this record, and we had just finished, all the tracks except for what I called Song of the Wind 2. And before he packed up his drum kit, I go, let's just play a couple, we'll use a couple major, minor chords here like I did in Song of the Wind, and let's just see what comes out, And we just played live in the studio, Igor, myself, and Smith, and then I put the bass on later. But I just played a live solo, and it just came out like one take like that, and he packed up his drums and left, and I listened to it after I put the bass on, and I go, I didn't know if I was going to put it on the record or not, much like I didn't know if I was going to put Irish Fields on the record, because that was just like a little experiment that I did, in some downtime while Steve was doing something else, and I had, high tune guitar, and I just wanted to try something different. And I go, well, I probably won't use that on the record, but I just,
adds a nice texture on there.
Just keep laying stuff down and checking it out later, not so thinking about it before you do it.
This one's for M. It says, did she dig it?
Yeah, she dug it.
Is that her favorite jam?
Yeah,
on the
her
record?
being Irish, she loved it.
She got into it. As we think about one other final note on that Santana thing. Last time we talked, not last time, I don't know which time, one of the times we did a lot of talking about Santana, and you had said, someday it would be really cool if we could do like a Santana Journey tour or something like that, like a gigantic thing.
I'm still working on it. Carlos and I are probably talking more in the last couple of years, more than we ever have.
Nice.
And so we text each other all the time.
It could happen.
It could happen. It could happen.
And you would like that?
I would love it.
You've gotten to do so much. You're such an accomplished guy. You have so much to be grateful for. You rocked this town 5 nights in a row at an arena. You've done that Crater we talked about. You got all these fans that adore you. Is there something that is still calling to you musically that, you're thinking, man, there's this thing, I want to do this project, or there's a guy maybe you really want to still work with that...
I think my work is never done until, I'm 10 toes up. And so, I'm going to be one of those guys like BB or Jeff Beck, I'll constantly strive to move forward. I'm definitely not one to sit in neutral. I think anybody that knows me knows that, or just rest on my laurels that I've, been very successful with the band. And, a lot of people, I think, in my position that have been as successful as we've been together as a band would just play that and play nothing but that. Never worry about making a new record or anything. Don't Stop Believing. It's the biggest downloaded song of the 21st century ever. And, some people will go, that's good enough for me. I don't need to try anymore. My vision for myself and my quest to move forward is my feelings are you're only as good as your last statement. And so last night was it for me, and Friday will be the next one.
Hey, I hope you have fun today. Was this okay?
Very good.
You enjoy going through the stuff?
Yeah, absolutely.
I appreciate it. 7 times getting to do this with you in Honolulu. It really means a lot to you, my brother. You're a real solid dude. Neal Schon, Journey, The Calling is the album. Stay in touch. Maybe we'll do the band unplugged in here next time.
All right, Dave.
Is that a nice
cool,
goal?
Buddy.
Something
All right,
to shoot
cool,
for?
Man. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Aloha. This is Neal Schon from Journey. And whenever I get a chance, my radio is turned on to this crazy man right here. My good buddy, Dave Lawrence. Rock on, Davey boy.